Hello. Welcome back to the Earth Sea Love podcast. Glad to have you with us. So, you're back for this second episode in the new season of the new series called Practicing Creative Fugitivity. And this episode is brought to you with the funding from Arts Council England. I have to remember to say that. I should also put it in the show notes. Note to self, funding Arts Council England, show notes. Thank you. So we're talking with Rita Gayle today. Rita is an academic who grew up in Sheffield, and we do touch upon childhood and growing up in a strong Afro-Caribbean community, to the point meaning that Rita never felt unsafe as a little black girl, and that is such a welcomed place to be in. So we touch upon our childhoods, but then we do get into the academy, being a black scholar in the academy, and how you have to navigate and negotiate being in there, which is a dangerous, harmful place. So we do talk about Professor Jason Arday again. And a side note here, let's just say Nathan Coffness. Behind every accusation is a confession. And I will be sharing the article that was in the Canary, which details Coffness' background and how he's such a fraud himself. He points the fingers at other people as a way of taking the spotlight off himself, because it's him who's fraudulent, him who isn't an academic, him who's been financed by far-right big tech people. And what happened to Professor Jason Arday, as Dal said, it was a targeted assassination. So we do touch upon Professor Arday, and in the context of how within the worlds that we are creating, we're creating a world through this project, Practicing Creative Fugitivity, where we are human, where we can be in our wholeness of our humanity, feel all the feels, have our flaws and mistakes there and not be held against us, that we don't put anything on a pedestal, but we still care for each other, we still love each other. Community, having that community around us who recognize us, is priceless. And this is what we're creating with this project, with our reading, but not just leaving it in the books, not just leaving it in theory, but putting it into practice. I've definitely been feeling my community around me. And the thing is like what happens, and having these conversations with these black and brown women who are part of the Practicing Creative Fugitivity sister circle. We've been reading Fugitive Feminism together, but we're not just reading together, we're actually living together, sharing together, we're supporting each other. And that is a beautiful world to be creating, dreaming, imagining together. And that also comes up with Rita. And just a side out there, Rita was part of Politics of Pleasure, who was part of when fugitive feminism, the context of fugitive feminism was, there was a series of interventions in 2018 at the ICA around the issues and the points that are raised in this book. And Rita was there. So it's really good to have that context for the groundwork that was laid for the creation of fugitive feminism for Emma Julu. Yeah. So we talk about the book, but we also broaden out, and it's a rich, I say this every time, but it's a rich conversation that got me thinking about a whole heap of things and seeing it from a different angle, about decentering the human, about ambivalence and how that might have different connotations within the UK and the USA context. But basically, what I take away from this episode with Rita, I mean, apart from blowing my mind and like getting me off on all different tangents, was that how we're only on this planet Earth, this space, for a liminal and a limited amount of time. And the question is like, how do you want to be living in this world? How do you want to be moving through this world? And it is a choice, and that's a privilege. Rita rightly said, is like, what world do you want to be living in, and what world do you want to be creating? And that is a choice, and that is a privilege. And I'm so pleased and so grateful that I have that privilege to choose. That is where my power lies, and that's where my freedom lies, in those choices that I make. And I don't want to be spending this limited time on this planet coming up or putting my energy into combating hate or proving that I am human or proving that I'm a good Negro. No. I'd rather spend my time and energy and attention on building worlds with people who have this similar ilk as me, and where there's joy, where there's so much joy and freedom. Anyhow, that's me riveting on again. But please stick around, listen to the conversation with Rita Gayle, and enjoy and share. Share. Thanks for being here. Bye for now. Until next time.
I'm ready.
We can dive in, because all I do is I'll start with the first one to just settle you in, because when we were recording a Sea Glove podcast before, it's nature orientated, nature connection. So I always used to say, what's your name, where are you calling in from, and let's get you situated. Yeah. Where you calling in from? Can you see nature outside your window? Yeah. But I'd like you to do that. What's your name? Where you calling in from? But I'd like you to start with what brought you to the Practicing Creative Fugitivity project.
Wow. I think for me, this is something that I've always been engaging with that just didn't have the words, I guess. I've always been interested in how to use creativity, not just only as a standalone art, but how it's used to express all aspects of my being. And I guess, growing up, a Black girl, I'm Gen Xer, growing up in Sheffield, in the late 20th century, as we call it now. It was hard. The good things about it were that I was a part of a Black community, in a sense, the Caribbean heritage community in Sheffield, and the part of Sheffield that I grew up with was very strong. And one of the things I can take away, and as I've got older, I've become even more appreciative of this, is that I never felt unsafe as a child. And I know there are so many people, and we're talking, as many Black women out in the world that didn't experience that as a child, maybe don't experience that as an adult, but they didn't experience that as a child. And I'm very grateful that my parents and the wider community kept me safe, so I never felt unsafe. And so for me, it's about giving space to our imagination. I think this is so important. And so I felt I was able to dream as a child, go off into spaces, partly as a response to clearly things of, what we would describe as misogynoir, right? And just understanding, as you get, there's that point, isn't there? And I think you kind of realize, oh, I'm the Black girl, and what that means. it's a kind of slow dawning on you what it means to be the Black girl, what that means, or what society is telling you what it means. And so what are the tools at your disposal to deal with that? To even at the point where you're too young to understand, to articulate it, but you're feeling all of these things, you don't know how to describe it. And those things, the imagination, those thinking through all of those things, it is that is the fugitivity. But I wouldn't have known that word. But I was already doing that. And I wasn't the only one. There were lots of other Black girls who were doing that, but we didn't have the words to describe what that was at that time. As was my mother and my aunties, I wasn't, you know what I mean? As a generations, I'm part of a genealogy of Black women that have done this and are still doing this.
Gosh, I love that. I love that because you have just made me look at fugitivity, the fugitive attitude and spirit in a different perspective there. And that resonates with me when I think about my childhood growing up in Bradford. Um, and yeah, even Bradford and then later in Newcastle, still just the odd Black girl. Um, and how I did lean into my imagination, to that safe space, because I did feel safe for an amount of time, and then once my dad died when I was 9, my whole world was just turned upside down, and that innocence or that belief that that I was safe and secure and everything was all right and everything was rosy was a mirage when it came to reality. It's like, yeah, my dad's gone and I didn't even know he was going, you know?
Wow.
So while he was alive, I used to lean into color. I used to love color and I used to create these images for him. It was just me making shapes on a page and coloring them in and
Mm-hmm.
them to him as a sign of love. And after he died, there was a period where I didn't touch color. I didn't go near
Mm.
color. I didn't go near color. And that was because I was thrust into a very harsh world. But yeah, but it's not about me. It's not about me. Let's
Mm.
carry on, because the next thing that I want to ask you is, because after I'd sent the book to you, you came back and said that you were part of the original reading group that started around when Fugitive Feminism was published in 2018, was it? Or 20?
2022, the book was published.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you tell us a bit about that experience of reading it in a group? Yeah, give us the
Well,
date of that.
so the fugitive feminism, and actually in the back, Akugo alludes to that. Um, but fugitive feminism, my kind of, I guess, involvement with it happened in 2018.
Mhm.
So it was I guess you would call it a series
Mm,
of interventions that were timetabled across a week, a midweek, starting mostly evenings and then during the daytime, all day Saturday and most of Sunday. And so a 5-day series called Fugitive Feminism, which took place at the ICA London in July 2018. And Okugo, Professor Emejulu, was the curator of the event. And so there were a number of activities taking place across those 5 days at the ICA London. And I was one of I guess, one of the groups of people that were participating.
mm,
So I was part of a collective called Politics of Pleasure.
mm,
And we were, myself and two other, artists, writers, creatives. So the actual date was 18th to the 22nd of July 2018. And this information is still on the ICA website, so you can find that. And the politics of pleasure. So I was working with two other people. Dr. Nadia Aswabi is completed her PhD at SOAS, and her research is on Black feminist theory. Some of you may have read her work. She did centering the work of, Marcus Garvey's wife, because she was actually working at the ICA at that time. So Ifeanyi Awache is a Nigerian American artist, filmmaker who was working as an assistant curator at the at ICA. And so we had all met for the first time at a lecture at Goldsmiths, or a keynote actually lecture by Gail Lewis. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I'd met them both individually, and they said, you two need to meet. And I thought, where can we meet? And Gail Lewis was doing this talk. And the title of the talk was Once More for My Sisterin, which has now been adapted into an article. So you see how these circles meet together?
Yeah.
So Nadia is of Jamaican heritage, but was raised in the US as well. But she works here now and lives here now. But Ifeanyi Awache had done a master's at SOAS. So we all had a SOAS connection. Ifeanyi and Nadia through postgraduate studies, and I had worked as an administrator whilst I was preparing to start my PhD. So that's how we met. It's kind of a SOAS connection. And we started talking about this, and we decided to put some activities together. So we did a workshop, we did a reading group, we had a round table. Lots of things happened, but there were other things. There was DJ sets, there was talks. It was a really eclectic mix of Black women talking, experimenting, thinking through ideas. I mean, I even now, as I'm thinking about it, it was really exciting, actually. Being at the ICA at that time was a really joyous experience. Like the energy, it was the energy that was there. And it feels very surreal as I'm thinking about it, because it feels like a very long time ago. It's not that long ago, but it feels like a very long time ago. But I think that's important to understand that, because I think sometimes we read something, but there's a whole context in which these things happen. So like you and I grow up in Bradford, in Newcastle, in Sheffield, but there's a whole community of which we're birthed from that may not be recorded in a real way. They could be, but you know what I mean? Those nuances of those communities gets lost or erased. And I think it's important to understand that there were dozens of Black women, young women of different ages. I was one of the oldest ones, so a lot of them would have been millennials, probably in their 20s, maybe 30s, involved in this, doing many different things. Some were direct activists, some were artists, some were students, some were, doing lots of different works. And they came together and brought this energy, and I wanted to acknowledge them, because I think it's important to think through about how we gather together. I mean, I'll come back to that, but I think part of this work that we're doing, that we're talking about, is about community. It is about community. And that's a very, very difficult thing to practice in an anti-Black world, because it's anti-community.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging all of that, Rita. I really appreciate it. And it really hits home. It really does, in the sense of what you've just said there, just at the end, because we are going to go back to gathering together and that energy. But let's just sit where you are now and think about anti-Black, anti-community, and let's bring to the fore, what do you actually do in your day-to-day, and how is your everyday experience of where you are working, and how is that a reflection of the state of Black academia, Black scholars in UK institutes, etc., etc.? Because we know we're recording this after the passing of Professor Jason Arday. And I keep mentioning this, but I want to keep mentioning this because I'm so focused on voicing the good that he's brought into the world. Yeah. So let's talk about your working and, the current state of Black scholarship in the UK Academy. I know it's far reaching, but you
Mm,
go get into it anywhere you want to.
I mean, yes, thank you. I think it's important that we name, and mark the passing of Professor Jason Arday. Um, and I think it's important to do that because don't believe the hype. The number of Black scholars in the UK Academy is very narrow.
Mm-hmm.
I remember uh, Dr. Chantel J. Lewis, who had collaborated with Jason in the past, stating that, Black scholars, it's 1 degree of separation. This term 6 degrees of separation. And in the
Yeah.
UK Academy, if you're a Black scholar, it's 1 degree.
Mm-hmm.
That's how tight the community is. It's not because we're all chummy, it's because there's so few of us. And I remember doing some research looking at the data. I think they said something like 1%, less than 1%. It's actually less than 1% the of scholars at professorial level in the UK Academy are Black.
Yeah.
But the population of us, our population is around 4 to 5%, including mixed heritage, people of African or Caribbean heritage. So by calculating that in relationship to the UK population, there is a shortfall of around 85%.
Mm.
So, however, so that's at the top at professorial level. But at the beginning, at undergraduate, we are overrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
So our figures, so even though we're about 4 to 5% of the population, we're about 7 to 8% of the undergraduate student body.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So something happens from the time we start our undergraduate degree, where there's a lot of us, more than we should be. And by the time we get to the top, there's less.
Yes, interesting.
So that's how the structure works. We get pared down, bear down, bear down, bear down. On the state of scholarship, it's funny. I'm having this conversation all the time with Black scholars. What I would say is, from my experience, two things happen. One, I describe the industry of the academy as a kind of bad corporation, meaning that people go into the academy, it's a career path. People go in for different reasons, right? So I didn't go into the academy. I'm older as well, but I didn't go into the academy as a career path, right? But I think if you go in there as a career path, so I think we have to distinguish between the motivations for people going into the academy, because I think they're very different. And that, I think, speaks to, I guess, the historic nature or the classic nature of how Black studies formulated. So I think people have different motivations. And I think those things are very rarely discussed. So there's a lot of assumptions because we all have the share. The skin type is similar, that we have so many things in common. And actually, the reality is, if you take the skin thing out, we have very little in common often. So people are there for different reasons. They want different things. And so your motivation for being there dictates the way you navigate that space. And I think this is where the conflict comes in, because you have those who go in for different reasons. And that's something I've had to reconcile, because a lot of scholars want to go in there. It's a career path. And so just like any other corporation, go and work at a bank or financial services, or go and work at an advertising agency. Yes, you may be concerned about, how financial services, treats Black communities, how it impacts the lives of Black people. You may work in advertising and worry about the representation of Black people in commercials and brands, but you're trying to get here. And so this is where the conflict lies, I think. And I think we haven't really, I don't think those conversations are happening, because it's uncomfortable. And I think often because it's so hard to get there, there's so few of us. And also no one talks about class very rarely, although we do have that conversation, but it's not really discussed. People's navigation of these spaces are very different because of our diversity. I'm not talking about specifically about people of African heritage, Caribbean heritage, but those things are not discussed. And so it becomes very difficult for people to form communities or perform collective responses, because what are we agreeing on? What is it that we want collectively? And I think moments like this, maybe the positive thing about them is that it forces people to really reflect upon those things. But my concern is that it's a moment, that it's not activating people. They're in grief. A young man has died, has lost his life. That's terrible. A lot of us met Jason in person. There are many people that I know knew him quite well. And so it's personally very devastating. And also it sends a very powerful message. You know, he was, I think we can say this without any shadow of a doubt, he was the most high profile Black British scholar living in the UK Academy up until his death. And so for him to die in this way, to lose his life in this way, is a devastating thing. Mm-hmm. Because whatever your feelings or thoughts about this sends a very powerful message. And everyone heard it. Everyone, every Black scholar in the UK heard that message. It was like a siren. And it can't be ignored. And what will be interesting is our response to it. I've got a good idea what my response is. I'm not sure about what other people's responses outside of my own group, because this what we're talking about, fugitivity and about the work we need to do. I'm already thinking about those things. I'm already doing those things. I think the challenge is for those people who are thinking of the academy as a career path. What does that mean to you? What does it mean? And how important is it for you? How are you going to navigate that career development? Because so many things are tied up in this. The aspiration to be in these Russell Group universities, to be at Cambridge and Oxford. And I would say in relationship to that, I don't distinguish between the Russell Group and the newer universities. For me, if you're a Black scholar in a university, it doesn't matter what its ranking is, you're in danger. It doesn't matter which one it is. I know some think it's more dangerous if you're in this one. I think that's absolute nonsense. I think as a Black scholar, your experience, it's indifferent. It doesn't matter really. We may think it does, but it actually doesn't, because the same things are experienced regardless of what the academic ranking of the institutions are. It doesn't distinguish really.
No. Thank you for that, Rita. I mean, okay, let's say the immediate reaction that has been happening is that, they set up the GoFundMe in memory of Professor Jason Arday. And it's just I can't remember his name, Sir
Patrick Vernon.
Thank you. And he's just sent an update today. I think it's important to go back to Jason Arday's work and words. His students have set up a website saying everything good about Jason Arday, because what's out there has been flooded with negativity and attacks on. But we're also taken from his words himself, how he got into the academy, and he said, "I realized it was a selfish, cold, brutal space to be in." And when he was asked that question of how he would like to change the world, he said he would like to take a thread and needle and interweave more love into society. Yeah. And
Mm.
in a lecture that I just watched of him, he was saying that he would want more care and compassion within the institution, within the academy, and how, that's what they're saying. Can we not have as his legacy moving forward, working to create, not just in the academy, but in society, in community, a more caring, compassionate, and kind and loving environment? Now, I've always been on this love ethic. I've always seen love as a powerful practice, even in the face of hate. But
Mm.
now I'm becoming a bit more discerning. And I'm channeling my love and my care ethic into communities, into gatherings, into villages of Black and Brown sisters. Yeah.
Mhm.
I I can only say and thank every single one of them that these past few weeks, when there's been this racial smear campaign against Professor Jason Arday, and then after I'm calling it a public lynching,
Mm.
how people have, my Black and Brown sisters have come together, and we've been supporting each other, and we've been checking in on each other. Now,
Mm.
I'd love to hear you discuss not just that care ethic, that compassion, that kindness, but then how we're doing this as a practice, but it's not just in theory. We're actually doing it. It's an
Mm.
action. We're actually showing up for each other, checking in on each other, and we're doing
Mm.
that in our minds, our hearts, and our souls, and our bodies. And we're working out ways to move through this society, which is anti-Black, anti-community, anti-caring, together, so we can keep our wholeness. What
Mm.
what can you say around this practice? Because you said you know how you're going to respond, and the people around you are going to respond. So let's think about your community. How are you working together here in community, and
Mm.
collaborating and practicing care? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I think it's really important that as Black scholars, with Black British scholars, that we do speak to this. I
Mm.
think we're all taking a moment because I think we don't want to speak in haste. And I think a lot of people are just in shock, you know. It's actually the holidays for a lot of people in the academy. So people are not at work, you know. Um, but I think what it absolutely is doing is for my peer network, it's actually made us it's made things it's given greater clarity to what we're doing. That's what it's done.
Mhm.
But also as well reminding us, because we recognize, and even though we know these things, like life is very fragile.
Mm.
Our time is not assumed, and that whatever we need to do, we've got to get on with it. And it's really helping us to kind of push through the individualism and say, okay, we want to get this done. Is it more important that we get it done, or is it more important that I'm acknowledged for getting it done? You know what I mean?
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, and actually, I have a group of people around me who are scholars who are saying, you know what, we just need to get it done. Yes, we'll work and we'll work together. And I think it's recognizing what's important right now. And I think there as well, and also as well, it has to be a critical space. I think we have to be mindful of creating. We want sometimes personalities, and I think not at this moment. I think everyone's dealing with the shock, but I don't want I don't want him to become this kind of poster child, as this kind of like, you know, this character, this larger than life character who's not real. He was a person. You know, he went to the shop and, you know, maybe bored on one day and, you know what I mean? Didn't call you back when he said he was going to. I don't want people to forget that real thing. And I think as Black people, we have to be really mindful of that. as putting him as some kind of, above, more than human. That he
Yes.
was just a normal person who was trying to do something.
Mm.
Because I think then it can take away our own responsibility of what we need to do. I think often, and this speaks to the wider society, people feel like they can't do stuff. They feel like there's a sense of not feeling they not feeling they have agency, that there's no hope. There's a sense of hopelessness
Mm.
that people can be drawn into, and that actually change happens because ordinary people say we've had enough. And
Mm.
a few of them, enough of them get together and say we've had enough and decide to do something. And I think, yes, there's very few Black scholars in the UK Academy, but we're very smart and we're very organized, and a few of us can do a lot if organized. So I think it's about reminding us of not only who we are, but where we've come from, and that we're here, and that we can do anything we set our mind to do. And whether that's within the institutions of the ivory tower, some things can be done there, some things should be done there. But many of the things that we've done there moving forward, we probably don't want to do it there.
Yes, yes, because that is something that Dal Kula, again, shout out to Dal. But in an email exchange today, she was saying she shared about Sarah Ahmed saying around transforming institutions from within. Yeah.
Yeah.
But how I feel with the Practicing Creative Fugitivity project, with the zinester Sanctuary, how we are actually sharing and disseminating knowledge and learning and practice outside of the institutions. We think about Fred Morton and we think about fugitivity, and he was saying about the undercommons, and that was being part of the university. But like what we're doing is under outside surrounding, it's definitely outside of the institution. And I don't think it should be either or. I think
Mm.
it's an and a slash and a both.
I agree with you there. I'm definitely in agreement. And also as well, it speaks to our elders. We have and still have, but I know it's coming back in fashion in more numbers. It never went away, but it kind of, went a bit quiet, is the supplementary school system, which
Yes.
is one of the greatest things our elders brought. It was a response to something, but it worked.
Mm.
And so, this is not about reinventing the wheel. A lot of the things we have done in the recent past, they can be brought back, and can be sustained. Because I'm about sustainable practices, because I think I'm very conscious that often whilst I do believe things can be for a season, it's not to say everything needs to last. I'm not interested in necessarily for myself building institutions or new institutions. But I do think there's something in handing on the genealogy of you doing something. It could just be I've written a po this I there's a book here and I've done 2 pages and I hand it on to the next generation, so
Mm.
that they know what I wrote in those 2 pages. Now they could write something completely opposite, but then they know, have
Mm.
a sense of what happened before their time. Because I think what Britain has been so brilliant at is erasing our histories. So everyone thinks they're starting again. There's a sense of like, I'm starting again, I'm starting again, I'm starting again. And I didn't know this, and I didn't know this, and I didn't know this. And a lot of what I think has been exciting about scholarship in the UK Academy over, I would say in the last 40 years for sure, is that we've been finding a lot of rediscovering a lot of those hidden, so-called hidden histories in Britain, and making sense of our experience here, and actually extending the timeline. So
Mm.
what is happening now in 2025 makes sense if you understand what was happening in 1925 and in 1825 and in 1725. It starts to make sense,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
as opposed to this is all new, I don't understand. And I
And
think this is the work that we need to be doing. Yeah,
but not just extending the timeline and thinking about years, but then actually in the period expanding it.
that's right. That's
So
right.
actually getting those nuances, or we're finding out that okay, what you said earlier, we might have the similar skin color, but there's diversity within there.
Absolutely.
And I think that is something that is happening and is welcome. And I think it's glorious. And I think how we can add to it now is,
Yeah.
as you're saying, writing those 2 pages. Or for me, it's my visual journaling.
Yeah.
Or it's the zines. Or just recently this weekend, I was with Dal and in Sheffield doing the slow stitching
Mm.
ancestral scrolls. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how it's not just, needle and thread and cloth and imagery, but it's in the process and the practice so much is remembered and
Mm.
heard and acknowledged, and it goes into every stitch. And then that is something that is there as evidence. It's a living archive. I'm all
Right.
living archives, and I love that. So like just a couple more questions, because something that you did bring up is like you wanted to discuss the uses of collaboration in
Yeah.
Black feminist knowledge production in Britain. Do you think
Mm.
that we've touched upon that, or do you want to expand that a bit more?
Yeah, I'll just to close it, because we did kind of discuss that, but just to say and just to kind of reiterate that when I say collaboration, it's really important, and we have a history of that in Britain, very strong history, recent history as well. But the academy, which I call, it's a corporate environment that is very anti-collaboration,
Yeah.
right? So it's not set up for you to collaborate with someone. It's set up for you to be in opposition to them,
Mm,
because you're both trying to get ahead,
mm,
and you can't both win, right? It's a competition. So collaborating is always, there's always something there lurking in the background. I think this is when I was talking about, I guess I was thinking about also the experiences of yourself and Dal working together. And basically what I was saying or attempting to say was that the work in which you're doing with the zinester, for example, would be very difficult to replicate in an academy system,
mm,
because you would have to justify the outcomes. What's the purpose of this? Why are you doing it? Who is it for? Um, and also your relationship with the participants would be very different, because the motivations for you doing it are different,
mm.
and the outcomes, what the university requires from you, would be different, and it would completely change those dynamics. And I think this is why, the in and out is really important, because I think, in the way the working the what Patricia Noxolo calls the para-academic space, which is where you're doing
Mm.
deep learning as, but it's not on the campus. It's somewhere else. And those things are both necessary. But we know, it's been in the news, the UK Academy, the ivory tower itself, is under attack. We can't, it will be there, but it in 50 years from now, it may not be the way it is now. So you see what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
really important to have these spaces that we have, because our access to the academy, the ivory tower, will evolve,
Mm.
right? So, and it may not be productive for us to be there in the way that we have, like we're currently overrepresented in undergraduate.
Mm.
That could change in 20 years. So where will those young people, necessarily or young at heart, go to learn if they're not going to the university? Because that knowledge is still required. Where will they learn those things? And so these spaces are really important to create those other spaces to learn. So yes, the academy is there, but there are different ways to learn. Just as a pedagogical practice, everyone learns in different ways. Some people like to write, some people like to speak orally, some people like to paint. And I think we have to think about learning in that practice. Like, they're all doing different things, and it's okay. You have to find your space. Some people want to be on the campus, they want that taught experience, but a lot of people don't. So it's like, where's the option for something else?
And I think, taking on board what you just said there, and you mentioned the Zinester Sanctuary. and me and Dal collaborating or working together. And there's a number of things that come up. I don't feel that there's a hierarchy within the zinester sanctuary. There's not one upmanship in that between me and Dal, say, or even with the participants. So I think that's one point. The second point is like zines are becoming more prevalent within the academy as a
Yeah.
research tool. And in a sense, for me, looking from the outside in, I mean, I do go into the academy for different things, but I never stick around. It almost feels as if it's been co-opted and
Mm.
diluted and taken away from its origins, its natural purpose, which was to get out those marginalized
Yeah.
voices and views. And one of those, one of those marginalized were Black women, Black feminist thought and theory, etc. So there's that's going on at the academy. And I do feel that I want to I want to believe and invest in that. There's the academy learning and there's learning in other spaces, alternative learning. But within the system that we're in, there's still that hierarchy, you know,
Mm.
there's still more credence, more, more weight given to, oh, okay, I've got letters before and after my name, rather than having that learning experience and that knowledge and that wisdom and that intuition in a sense, which is outside the academy, and how there is always that friction between, oh yeah, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, but then when you find out, okay, that I've got no qualifications, oh well, then shut up because you're not qualified to speak. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm, absolutely.
And that, so like, because the academy institution is in with this whole system, which is created from the hierarchy, there's always going to be more value put on certain knowledges, certain learning,
Mm.
certain voices, certain speaking. So that's what I'm interested to know then, as a Black woman in the academy, are you consciously putting into your work, your lectures, your own learning as well, and what you're sharing, that Black feminist knowledge practice? Is it something that is unconsciously happening, or is something that you actively have to make sure it's in there or embedded in there or given as a, another point of view? Because I know, and if we think about the book for fugitive feminism, in there, Emma Julu says that when she was in uni, it was Aristotle, it was all these white thinking man, and then when she called it out, saying like, they said that Black women are beasts, not rational,
Mm.
and how to come to terms with that. And the advice is like, all right, because well, whatever they're saying is universal, and then try to bring in or pin in their Black feminist thought as if it's an afterthought.
Mm.
But for us, where we're coming from, it's our core. It's where we're coming from. It's a given. So the idea that, again, it's that hierarchy. It's that idea that whatever comes out of a white man's mouth is universal because it applies to everyone. And it does
Mm.
not apply to anyone. It does not include. It does not include. So, I mean, there's loads of stuff that I'm saying in there, but for yourself, in your practice, how do you find that you negotiate to bring in more Black feminist knowledge?
Yeah. I mean, it's something you have to do intentionally.
Mm.
It has to be intentional because you're kind of swimming against the tide. So throughout my experience doing postgraduate study into the PhD, I've had to be intentional, and I've always had people questioning, oh, you haven't put this person in. I'm like, as if I haven't. I said, yeah, I know, that's by choice. Have you heard of this scholar? I have, but you haven't cited them. I haven't, and it was a choice. So I'm very intentional in my citational practice, but I've been challenged many times on that. And actually, as a result of that, and I think that comes up more so, it's a real issue when you're talking about journals. When you're submitting journal articles, that's when it really comes up, because the rule is, it's a kind of quid quo pro, as they say. I cite you, you cite me. It's all a bit chummy chummy. And then you randomly pick some black woman who's not in the academy. They're like, why are you citing her for? Where a da 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 da. And as a result of that, I'm not saying I will never do a journal article again. I never say never, but I will only write future journal articles under very particular circumstances, when the conditions are favorable.
Yeah.
So and that will be very occasionally. So I never say never. There are uses for journal articles. By and large, I will no longer participate in the process, because it's a process of violence where you are beaten into citational by these citational overlords and madams into submission. And there's no way out. You can't resist it. It's either in or out. And it's all very everything's behind behind curtains, so you never know who it is that you're dealing with. So I don't get involved in that. I've just recently done an article, but that's because it was an historic thing and we just needed to kind of do it almost as if to kind of close the door on something. But I'm not sure I would do one again for this reason, because the citational violence is so oppressive that I just think, you know what, I'd rather just put this thing out on Substack or just create a PDF and send it to people. That would be easier. But again, I think that, but you can only make that decision if you have to, in a way, think about what is your relationship to the academy, because it requires certain things of you in order to progress. There are moments in history where those rules and regulations could be loosened, affordances. But if you're not in that moment where the affordance is there, you missed it. And it might not come back around again for another decade, by which time, where will you be? So I've made a decision that I won't do that kind of work, because I don't want to get in an argument about this. I know what your politics are. You're not going to change. You want me to change. And this is a red line for me. But that's not a difficult decision for me to make. But I know for a lot of Black scholars, it's a difficult decision for them. It's unfortunate, but it is a difficult decision for them to make, because their motivations for being in the academy is not the same as mine.
Yeah. No, I hear you, because as I say, I'm not in the academy, and there's only certain times that journals or recently chapters submitted to, and one again, it's around motherhood and Black mothers, and it's interesting because I've done two that are still waiting for review, and the one that was totally on Black mothers and mothering and motherhood, still going through a long process of peer review. Yeah. While the other one, which is life writing and motherhood, and is being edited by 3 white women, is nearly there to be published. Bearing in mind, the first one came maybe half a year or more before that.
Quelle surprise, eh?
Yeah. How the one that's going to be, hopefully, and I say hopefully, I'm not bothered, because it got to the point where I was writing about Adriana Smith, who was the Black woman who was kept alive while brain dead so her fetus could become viable in Georgia, USA. And this is what I hang my whole chapter on. Put it in for review, and you get this feedback, and it's these 3 women talking amongst themselves, and I see the comments, and one is saying, oh, I didn't know about this, the other one and saying, oh, yes, well, we need some citation for it. And what they cite, giving as an example, is a piece about the issue, but it's by 2 white women.
Yeah. And
I just came back and says, hey, There's no way do I want this as my citation for this case. It's about a black woman, a black mother, and I'm talking all about black women. So I cited a blog or whatever like that. And there was pushback. I'm not, what do you call it, compromising any further.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't need to get it published.
right.
And I think that is what you're saying there about the motivation. I don't need to make my name for myself. I don't, why I was doing it is because I don't feel like there's enough imagery, essays, words out there about Black mothering. Whenever you see a mother, it's, I like to say, in the front of it in brackets is white. It's a white mother. That is the
Mm.
symbol, that is the image that we see all the time.
The journal thing and the book chapters, the citation politics is a real phenomenon. It's a real phenomenon, and
Very
and we got
great.
to get a hold of that. We got to get a hold of that.
It's harmful, it's violent,
100%.
and like so it gets to the point of saying, for me, is like, I don't need it. I don't need the hassle. And it's wrong. I don't go just like go silent. I stress my point and then I leave. Yeah, there's no
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, bearing this in mind, okay, so
Mm,
underlining thing, back to the text, the underlining thing that's coming here is, whiteness, or yeah, equals humanness. Yeah.
mm,
So in the text, it has, the premise is that Black women cannot be human. And then it's been using that non-human other. Do you
mm,
embrace that term? How do you feel about that term?
mm. Yeah, I mean, in the book, Akugo cites the article by Sylvia Wynter, right? The No Humans Involved. But she does discuss specifically I guess the first part, the Winter article, is in two parts in a way, because the article is an open letter to her colleagues
Mhm.
to discuss this. So I think that's important, the context in which Winter is writing this. Yeah, she's teaching in California. This is happening in California. She's talking to her colleagues, her academic peers about this.
Mhm.
Hello, she's raising the alarm. We're here in the ivory tower. This is happening.
Yeah,
So I think that's important, the context.
totally.
Yeah. I guess going back to this about the can Black women never be human? For me, there are two answers to that. In the context of the white supremacist patriarchy, the answer, of course, is yes. It's true, we're not human. But in the context of us creating our world of fugitivity, of course we are.
Mm.
So it depends on which world you want to live in, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
What world do we want to live in? And that's a choice.
Mm.
There are people around this world who may not have that choice,
Mm.
but I have that choice. That's my privilege at this moment in time, that Rita Gayle has that choice.
Yeah,
I don't know how long for, but I have it right now as we're recording this.
yeah,
And I choose, in the world that I'm occupying, I am human.
yes,
I am.
yeah. And it's not just the world you're occupying, it's actually the world you are creating.
That's right.
Yeah, you mentioned that imagination. Yeah, we've got that dreaming, but then also it's in our day to day and our relationships with our people in community and how we are reflecting back to each other our wholeness, our aliveness, our humanity. And what's underpinning that? What is the foundation? Is that care? Is that love? Is that compassion? Through thick and fucking thin,
Yeah,
yeah, we recognize our humanity, but we recognize we're flawed. We're all flawed.
we
And
are.
it's all right to have those flaws and make those mistakes. For me, that is part of being human. And I hope I'm in that world with you, Rita. I hope I'm in that world that
You
we're
are. We are in that world. And this goes back. why it's so important how we remember Professor Jason Arday as a human, not as a non-human.
No.
Because people can love him but treat him as a non-human, as an object to be revered.
That
But we
poem.
have to make sure he retains his humanity,
Yeah.
that he retains his flaws, that he was just a black guy from southwest London who wanted to be this. And we must never lose sight of that. You know what I mean? Who had dreams and ideas and just kept
Yeah.
going. We must remember
Yes.
those things.
And he wanted to bring others with him. And I think that's also important because I have, this fugitivity, this fugitive spirit, this fugitive attitude, this fugitive practice. And for me, it is, creating that world where we are more free, where we're working towards that freedom, where we're away from these structures, these hierarchies. But there's no point in running free if I'm alone, you
Yeah.
know. And that's what I feel that, yeah, Jason Arday was doing. He was opening the doors or trying to bring in more people and not just limiting to black and brown bodies, for everybody,
Mm.
He saw the humanity in everybody. And I totally take on board the idea that part of our wholeness or our fullness is our flaws, is our mistakes, and not holding it against those people that we love.
Mm.
That's how I hope I move through this world or practice or treat others.
And it
Even
has
though
to be that, because
it is.
if we can't do that, then nothing can, you know what I mean? The
Oh,
first sign of a challenge, and there will always be challenges, right? This is life, it'll all fall apart. And I think the community building is about, yes, we can challenge each other, we can correct each other, but also we provide that with love, right? And knowing, you know what, I was wrong today, you might be wrong tomorrow. We could be both right today and both wrong tomorrow, but we learn from that. And
yeah,
it's important for those coming behind us to see that
yeah,
yes, I may be old enough to be your mom, but I don't know everything. You know what I mean? I know this, but I may not know that. And it's like, yes, there's certain things I can teach you because I'm the same age as your mom, but there's things that you can teach me that I just don't know, because you're like a young person and you're navigating the world in a very different way. And you can teach me these things.
yeah,
Each one teach one. We learn from each other. That's the
yeah,
community. And as I say, we're in an anti-community world, in
yeah.
an anti-community society, and we have to constantly be pushing against that.
Yeah.
And it is hard. But there's joy in that. It's absolute joy. When you share those experiences together, it's the most wonderful thing. It really is.
Rita, just want to ask you if there's anything you want to put in there that you came with that we haven't managed to discuss.
Yeah, just a couple of things about the decentering of the human. I mean,
Mm,
the only thing I wanted to say about that is two things I want to talk about. One, I want to talk about the decentering of the human and also ambivalence.
mm,
So on the decentering of the human, I think for us, that conversation is happening right now. We have obviously AI, the development of AI, although that's not a decentering because there's still powerful people at the top managing it, right? For money, for power.
yeah.
But also we're in the era of the climate catastrophe. This is real now. Even the people that didn't want to believe it are saying, you know what, something's a guanin right now.
Mhm,
And so the climate is telling us, hey, fix up or we can continue planet Earth without you.
mhm,
We don't need human beings to be on planet Earth right now. The planet Earth can continue without humanity on this planet.
mhm,
So the decentering of the human can happen
mm,
and will happen if we continue on this trajectory, for sure. On the role of ambivalence, because that's a big part. That's a has takes up a bit in that. I know that Professor Emijulo talked about it. She wrote about this a bit more in other publications, so I know she just kind of touched on it here.
mm,
I think one of my, I guess, I think I'm always concerned about the use of this word ambivalence because I kind of think because I think Okugo comes from the States, which, okay, she's British now, she lives here. But I think because of the way American culture and Black culture in America has formulated, I think ambivalence can be used in a way there that doesn't work here. I think there's something in the way that our society is constructed. I'm talking about Britain. That ambivalence is for me, a very dangerous word, because a lot of what, for me, ambivalence is very close to terms like indifference in the British context. And it often prevents people, it often reduces agency, prevents people from doing the things that they need to do, to be active, that kind of thing of it. It's all complicit. There's nothing we can do, basically. It's game over. Yeah. And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to be in the British context. Yeah. Because I think there's something in the American culture that always has that can do, no matter how bad it is. There's a certain element in the culture, be it real or not, that they believe there's always a way. Whereas there's something about the British society culture that doesn't work in that way. So I'm nervous about using that term. But I wonder, in the British context, maybe a more appropriate word would be something like pragmatism. To be pragmatic, maybe it means something like this. So I think I would want to kind of think a bit more about the use of this ambivalence. But I think one of the questions in there was about ambivalence. Ambivalence is mentioned throughout the middle section of the book in terms of fugitivity, as well as moving forward from liminal spaces. So what is your take on ambivalence and being within this unknown spaces and places? Well, I chuckled at that, because I think a lot of the world that we're living is liminal. Because I know the context of liminal, the definition is looking at what I call communal spaces that we're passing through, the airports and all of that kind of thing. But a lot of the world that we're living is liminal. Things are not built to last. They're there for a time, and it's here today but gone tomorrow. The pop-up world, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not anti that. I think institutions, if we look at the ones that have been built in this world, a lot of them, we have challenges with them, right? So it's like, what we don't want is the Black version of the institution, right? Because, that we know those things can be problematic as well, have been problematic, and have been incredibly difficult to sustain, right? Yeah. So I think we are liminal as humans. We don't, this body is not going to be in this space forever. We transition to another plane. So I think we have to rethink what we mean about this, about what we think of as permanency, and of what is liminality. I think we have to rethink that. It's a very kind of, and I think especially because we're this is coming through the academy, through relatively mainstream publisher. I think often we have to push back against those things about what do we mean? What do we mean? Because, it's like, yes means yes, but yes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if we're speaking the same language, different things mean different things. So it's like, we need to drill down into that.
What do you mean? And like, for me, I mean, this is a new, and again, you got me thinking, Rita, and I appreciate that. I really do, because those two things for me, the decentering and the ambivalence, is coming together. Because when you were talking about community and learning from each other, you might be an elder and be able to pass on things or teach youngers, but they might be able to also teach you. And when you're talking about that, for me, in that community is nature, how we can learn and be guided by nature. And again, that goes into the ambivalence for me and that liminality, because within nature, there is that nothing does last forever. They're here for that short time. And that is evident, with the trees losing their leaves, there is that cycling, there is that passage of time where things are here and they've gone and they might come back again. And for me, what I take from that, with that decentering and that ambivalence or that pragmatism, is to not hold on so tightly, to things. For me, isn't an indifference if I'm letting it go. It is working with my everyday or my reality. And I think that comes with all those feels as well. There is that joy, but there's also that grief, you know,
Mm,
and part of being alive, part of that wholeness, part of that humanity is to allow all those feels to flow. And you
mm,
said that energy of gathering together. Well, there's that energy, isn't there? That
mm,
within us individually, and also that energy when we come together with others, and recognizing that within us and without us, and not holding on so tightly, and making the most of this liminal space where we,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, thank you for bringing in those, because again, it's so rich. Yeah. What you've said here and what I want to unpack. And, when I go back and listen to this while I'm editing, again, it comes to me some wisdom or things that will drop. So I really appreciate your time and your energy and your heart that you brought today, Rita. I
thank you.
just so enjoy speaking to you. And I hope we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely, we will. I mean, the conversation will continue, you know. We're
Uh,
all here for a time, you know.
yeah.
We have to take joy from that time, and I think part of that letting go, not holding on so tightly, is recognizing that everything is here for a time and that things like ownership, all of these things are very about letting go, the possession to be possessive, to own.
Own,
This takes us back into the world that we say we're trying to escape from.
to
We
own.
have to really unpack everything. And that's hard because I think especially for us as Black people, in this world, we're the Black people, so we're the good people. It's the good and the bad and all of this. But the world is not black and white. It never was. We have to understand we've been participating in this world, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes we've been openly supporting this world. We only need to look at our politics and our industries. We're front and center
Yeah.
in the formation of these cultures now. So
Mm,
we're participating. So
yeah.
it's like, what do we these worlds, the fugitivity, part of it, I guess, certainly modern day, that the conversation about abolition, which Cougar talks about with people like Ruth Wilson Gilmore. But what are we abolishing? Do we want to abolish? Because a lot of us are addicted to this world. Are we ready to let it go? It's like, are we ready to let the world go? Are we ready for a new world? We are going to be front and center in participating in that. And so it's exciting, but of course it's scary. This is the joy of being alive, right? You're able to participate. This is what life is about. It's about living.
Mm,
It's about living. We can't take those things for granted. And I don't take it for granted. And maybe it's because I'm getting older.
mhm.
I'm conscious about time because, over the last few years, I've said farewell to a number of people, some of them older, but not all of them. But people die young as well, as we know. So we don't know our time.
We
But I
don't-
think what I'm trying to do, and it's a small step, I'm just trying to be honest with myself.
It's a small step, but that's huge. That is huge, being honest with ourselves. It
Yeah.
so is.
You have to know yourself. You have to recognize yourself and think, oh, this is me. You have to catch yourself and think, ah, this is me.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
and acknowledge that that's you.
Yes, and embrace it.
Yes. And say,
Embrace.
oh, okay. Yeah. And embrace that.
Yes.
And allow others the same courtesy.
Yes. And like when I'm saying this care, practice of care and love and kindness and compassion, I'm gonna say it also, it applies to ourselves,
Mm.
It applies
And that's a real tough one for Black women. We
to
can be very generous to others,
totally.
right? We're very good at being generous to others. And what we struggle is to do that for ourselves. And I've seen it so many times. I've done it myself so many times.
Yeah.
It's a hard lesson for us,
Mhm.
but we are slowly getting there.
practice, man.
Practice, practice, practice. And this is why I say it has to be intentional, because we have learned, so we have been socialized, and we are constantly being messaged about how we need to be, how we need to behave, that we have to intentionally. This is why the practice is so important. We have to, because you have to go through that. It becomes a way of being, but you have to do it. It's an action. It can't just be reading.
No.
You have to do it. So that you feel that change, you feel that experience, so that you won't always have access to the book. You won't always have access to these materials, but your body, you're in that body, you're always going to know, oh, yeah, that feels right. No, that's not the way I should be doing it. No, I need to switch it up a little bit. It's about us living. It's about us living. My ancestors went through so much. They survived the evil violence, paternal and maternal. They've survived the plantations of Jamaica. They were never meant to survive those things for hundreds of years. And how could my ancestors have known that I would be here today? They didn't know, but they were imagining, I have to stay alive. I have to stay alive. I have to live through this because those that come after me will live. I owe that to my ancestors. I owe this to my parents to live.
Yeah. Thank you, Rita.
You.
Thank you.